Right here.
Welcome to the Monos Pod with Tino and Matt. This is episode 12. We are going to cover today our updated top 100. So we did a top 100 at the beginning of the offseason. Both of us have updated ours, done a lot of work, a lot of research in between the first list and now. It's going to be a lot of fun. What's up, Matt?
Going well. Just under a week to go, the opening day.
That's
So
right. That's
I'm
right.
stoked.
Let's see. So right off the bat, we'll start at the top, but before we do that, any huge surprises for you? What were some of your kind of bigger picture takeaways from doing the list a second time?
I've never done a list. Like I've always done lists for drafts, but I never done an initial list and then done a position list and
Mhm.
then go back and look at the overall list. So I tried to look at how I rank players individually with the positions and then to consider positions in making this list. So I think this list is, I'm much more confident in this list doing it that way. So it's been a fun exercise. It's been a fun exercise for my teams as well as kind of seeing how I value players and especially how positionality plays out in rankings.
Yeah.
Looking at
Is
work.
there anything? I guess I'll start by answering my own question, and then if you have something to add, uh, what have you found philosophically? Has anything changed for you in doing this exercise? Because I know for me, uh, one of the biggest things is I'm really starting to drill down on athleticism and explosiveness as far as understanding a player's upside. And I know that sounds very elementary in and of itself, but when looking for the elite players, right? We're all searching for the next top 10 overall player in fantasy. We're all searching for, someone who's going to be a cornerstone for our team. And we want to find those players first, right? We want to invest in them young. And for me, one of the biggest findings in watching film over the course of this off season and doing these exercises over and over again is that you can't get there without elite athleticism. You just can't.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so, one of the big, as an example, one of the big fallers for me was I had Kyle Manzardo all the way up at 17 in my initial
Mhm.
ranking, and he's down at 40 now. And 40 is not, is still top 50. I still believe in his bat, but the explosion isn't there, right? The athleticism that I'm truly looking for isn't quite there. And now you can make the case that it applies a little differently per position, but I just don't see and if it's not athleticism, maybe it's somebody like Freddie Freeman who's 6'5" with long levers, who's able to leverage the ball a little bit differently. I just
Mhm.
don't, for me, I'm starting to look on the hitting side for the elite athleticism, but the opposite on the pitching side, which is while stuff truly matters, if you don't have command, you don't have anything, right?
Mhm.
So it's interesting just to see how perspective and philosophy changes the more work you put into it and the more understanding you get.
Hmm. Yeah, I concur. That's one of the things, all of these exercises with it's been a great learning experience as far as looking at player video. Like I really wouldn't look at it that much, to be honest, with when I was playing fantasy and just looking at stats, looking at spring stats, not realizing that I probably should watch the starter pitch and not just look at his stats, see what he's doing, see what his stuff looks like, see what he's experimenting with. Same thing with hitters, what's going on with their swing, how athletic are they, how is their hand-eye. So I could confidently say, let's see, 1 through 12 on my list are all superior athletes.
Right.
And then Mead is 13 on my list, and he's not a superior athlete, right? But he's a great hitter. Cassis is right there as well, at that cutoff. The one that fell a little bit for me, Merrill's at the same spot, but I don't see the elite 5 category athlete. And the other one that fell a lot for me that I really like is Meyer at shortstop for Boston. great hitter, great contact, but not going to be that 5 category guy at shortstop. So,
Right.
and the two pitchers, I think G Rod and Yuri are in my top 12, but and they're outstanding athletes, right? You know, in the pitcher sense, and also have outstanding command.
Right. One other kind of philosophical thing is I've also started to really, because of pitcher injury, really started to value pitcher proximity and age a lot differently than I had previously. And so as an example, I had Harleen Susana. I don't remember exactly where I had him in the first list, but pretty high, right? And he's not no longer in my top 100. And it's no knock against Susana. It's just pure numbers, right? An 18-year-old throwing as hard as he is probably not going to make it without injury to the major leagues. It's just kind of the way it works. Whereas you take a 20-year-old Tink Hence or a 21-year-old Kyle Harrison, you can envision Harrison in the rotation this year. You can envision Hence in some form being on the Cardinals pitching staff end of this year, early next year, right? And so even though they're of similar age to some of the really young pitchers, 19-year-olds, the proximity really truly matters. And so that's something that I've started to change from list to list as well. One other finding for me is, I look for, we talk about which stats we value. And I think each manager values different stats in different ways. I still have Jackson Merrill at 20. He was at 13 on my initial list. But I think if I do one more, say mid-season, no matter what Merrill does between now and then, he's probably going to still be in my top 50, but he's probably going to be closer to 50 than 20. Here's why. And I had this hunch with major league players. So one of the big pluses with Jackson Merrill is his contact rate, right? He had a contact rate, not a zone contact rate, a contact rate above 90% last year. And I know fantasy managers who really do value contact rate, but when you look at the list of players who are below 80% zone contact, you see a lot of stars. And then you look at the list above 90% and you don't see a lot of stars. In my mind, it's quality of contact, not how often you do it, right? Making contact all the time means you might make weak contact often. And that's what I'm getting to is a high zone contact rate or a high contact rate may actually be indicative of more weak contact and a lesser player and not be a positive. That's the thing that people are propping up with Merrill currently. His contact is such a high number. I don't think that's a great thing. So what I did was I sorted on Fangraphs major leagues minimum 100 plate appearances last season, and I sorted by highest zone contact top 30, and I sorted by contact top 30. And of the top 30 zone contact percentages in Major League Baseball last year, only 3 of them had an OPS over 800, which I thought was absolutely wild, right? So we've got under zone contact, we have, give me 1 second here. Mookie Betts had an 873 OPS, and he was 11th in zone contact. Yandy Diaz was an
he made shitty zone contact for USA.
He did, yeah, he did. Yandy Diaz had an 824 OPS, but we all know the majority of that were walks. And then down at number 30 zone contact was Jose Ramirez at 869. And so
do you see a correlation maybe between zone contact and command, in the sense that just because you're hitting in the zone doesn't mean you're making good selection, right? Because you're looking for a pitch within the zone that you could hit. Same with command. Just because you could control it and hit the zone doesn't mean shit, right? But if you could command it and hit your spot, that's what makes a good pitcher.
Right. And it's execution. It's not just the fact that you can, it's executing to the best of your ability, right? Because on that list of top zone contact hitters, it's not as if there aren't good hitters on that list. They're just making, like Wander Franco. Wander Franco is a great example of a hitter. Last season, 94.2% zone contact rate. But I wish it was more like 85 and he was much, much more selective, right? If you were that coordinated, look for the exact pitch you want to hit and wait until you get the pitch. So I guess my point is that it's not about whether Jackson Merrill can make contact all the time. It's what does the contact look like when he makes it? And so for me, I'm looking
what about
for that explosive play. I'm looking for the explosive.
What about when you did just the basic contact? Did more hitters show up there?
No. So under
four.
just
Okay,
contact, there were 4 hitters over 800 OPS. They were, and even the high sevens, we're talking about Luis Arise, Stephen Kwan, Michael Brantley, kind of low impact fantasy players, right? So over 8, we had at 824 Yandy Diaz, same type of player. So Alex Bregman 820, but even Bregman's case, the reason why Bregman is a power player at third is not because he's powerful in and of itself. It's because he's learned how to hit the ball down the left field line in the air. That's what makes him great. So it's not athleticism and it's not power. Jose Ramirez at 869 is the other one. And then Jeff McNeil, 836. Luis Arise, Stephen Kwan, Jeff McNeil, Yandy Diaz. Like, are these players, despite the plus 800 OPS, are these players that you're looking to like prioritize on your roster in fantasy? For the most
they're good. They're good. You know, in hits league like ours or batting average leagues, they're decent, but are they ones that you want to invest in as prospects, right?
Totally. Right. And so getting back to the prospect thing, it's a stat like zone contact, which I hear a lot of people talk about. I think is important on the low end, right? If you're unable to make contact in the zone, you know, like a Diego Cartaya, right? Because of his zone contact rate, he may never get above 240. I think that's a good example of using the stat to filter. But if you're filtering it on the high end, what you're filtering for are kind of middling fantasy players, not great ones. So for me, that was a big finding that came from doing this exercise. I know it's a long-winded way of talking about it, but when I look at my list, especially my top 10, I don't see a lot of super high contact hitters. What I see is a lot of powerful, explosive players, whether it's purely athletic or they've learned how to utilize their core and their muscles to get the best out of it. So I think with that,
and talking about learning as well through this process, I think initially I was looking a lot at EV, which we really can't get, but hopefully we'll get it soon. Shout out to MLB to invest in that in the minors, but that needs to be coupled with contact, right? But I also, one of the things that I've added is really paying attention to eye, right? Because that's gonna show how selective they are, how coordinated they are in their minds to be able to quickly recognize pitches, where it's going, and so forth. So I think if we do consider contact, it needs to be in the context of EV and eye, right? And not necessarily valuing one over the other, right? So Bregman is an example. He's not going to be elite EV, but he has the eye, he has the contact in order to place the ball where he wants to.
Right. Simeon is the same way, right? He hits the ball. Isaac Paredes is the same way. They've learned how to place the ball in a specific spot. They don't have great EVs, any of the 3 of them, but they're right-handed hitters that have learned to hit the ball down the left field line in the air, and they have subsequently become very powerful, big home run hitters at premium positions. Speaking of home run hitters at premium positions, your number 2 is my number 1. My number 1.
Should I put my Yankees hat on here?
Sure. My number 1 fantasy prospect, he went from 2 to 1 for me, is Anthony Volpe. He jumped Carroll for me. Both of them are performing incredibly well in spring training. The 2 things that really kind of elevated Volpe for me was I gave Carroll the nod previously because I knew Carroll was going to be a major leaguer in 23. There was no guarantee that Volpe was going to make the Yankees or start. We now know that Volpe is going to make the team, and the assumption is if he's making the team, he's starting at shortstop, right? So that's number one that started to push Volpe up for me. The second one, and it's a big one, is that he plays shortstop. And while I grant the fact that outfield is not tremendously deep in the way it maybe has been historically, he's still a shortstop. And finding shortstops that can produce at the level of Anthony Volpe in fantasy, they just don't come around often, right? You watch him in spring training, you can watch 3 games of Anthony Volpe in spring training, and you walk away saying, I'm disappointed if it's 2020, 20 home runs, 20 steals. I'm expecting 25 home runs and 25 steals, but I'm not surprised if he reaches 30-30. I'm just not. That's how good of a player he is. His instincts on the base paths, the amount of, we're speaking about explosion and power and athleticism. Watching him swing the bat, it's almost a violent swing coming from like a 6 foot, 200-pound guy, but he's getting everything out of that swing. So for me, watching him play, when I compare he and Carroll, they're really, really close. I'd say Carroll is the much better runner. I think Carroll has, but I don't know that he capitalizes on that speed on the base paths in terms of steals in the same way that Volpe does. And I see Volpe having a little bit more explosion in the bat and a little bit more power. The other part of it is that Volpe is on a currently better offense. So I anticipate some of the counting numbers maybe being a little bit better for him, but they're close. I love him. I love both players. I wish I could have both players. But Volpe is my one because of position and because the proximity does not matter with either of the two of them anymore. Make your argument for Carroll at 1.
I'm not going to knock Volpe because, as you know, I was a supporter from the start. He got me Tatis from somebody else in our league.
Me.
So I do like him a lot. One of the things I like to look at, and this comes from a Baseball Forecaster, a study they did, how well when we're looking at power of prospects, and we're talking about genuine power, is that power to all fields, right? You're going to get somebody like Bregman who's kind of out of the box, right? That's extremely coordinated, could take advantage of left field. He's pull side power. I wish we did have spray charts with Volpe in the minors. I was Googling it for like an hour yesterday because I knew we were going to have this debate. But I did look at it. I did look at some of his home runs. I did look at his 2 spring home runs. One was hit to left, and one was sprayed pretty violently to right. And why was pay attention? Because everybody knows the short porch in New York. Is he going to be able to take advantage of that? I think he's a good enough hitter there. Why I would put Carroll above? I think both of them are high floor players. I would say even Volpe is more of a high floor player than Carroll. I have Carroll at 80 speed. I have Volpe at 60. I think there has been caution with Carroll last year because of his shoulder as far as base running. He is 4 for 4 this year. He is running hard. Just yesterday he hit a stand-up triple. Didn't even have to slide, and it was just kind of in the gap, right? He's last year on the metrics he was number 1 in speed, so he's 80 speed there. I would argue I think Carroll does have the power. His power is underrated. I do think he has a better hit tool than Volpe. I would wager on his average being better. His slug has always been above 600 every place he's been. Even last year, first shot at the majors has been pretty high. The 2 things I'll give you on that is shortstop. I do value the middle of the field shortstop. So I'll give you that on Volpe. I also would give the Yankees on Volpe as well as far as that lineup. The other thing too, if we were wagering on rookie of the year, like overall AP rookie of the year, Volpe has the advantage too because of the New York thing. There is that aura with Volpe that Carroll isn't going to get. But again, I'm not going to. I don't have like everybody. I think we've been consistent on this. Everybody has had Carroll and Henderson, and many have had Henderson number one. And I've always pushed back on that because I thought Carroll was better. I thought he was in a tier of himself by himself. I've always had Volpe too. I have no problem putting them at 1A and 1B just because they're the prototypical baseball players. They're gonna. I wouldn't be surprised if either goes 30-30 at some point. And I'm kind of down on the community too because there's a sense that because they are high floor players that this year's prospect class doesn't have the elite guy, but it's tough to argue, especially after what we've seen of them in spring, that they're not elite, right? So yeah,
I would look at my top 11. I think all have superstar potential. Every last one of them. I think there's tremendous. You can't watch Jordan Walker pre-shoulder injury in spring training and say that he doesn't have elite potential. That's 45 home run power, right? Or obviously Ellie De La Cruz is a no-brainer. But Volpe and Carroll are. You're going to tell me a 30-30 shortstop is not a superstar, right? You're talking about like Fernando Tatis level when Tatis was sane and healthy. So I don't know. I love both players. I agree. I think Carroll's hit tool is probably either a half grade or a full grade better than Volpe. I think. I do like the fact that Volpe hits right-handed. It means that I don't think you're going to see tremendous platoon splits with him. I don't know Carroll's numbers, his splits specifically, but obviously left-handed hitters for me, there is that you run that risk at times. But they're both fun. Each of us rosters one of them in our home league. So excited to have Anthony Volpe myself. I hate the Yankees. I've said before, I love Anthony Volpe. So those are our 1, 2. Who do you have at 3?
I have James Wood at 3.
Ooh, okay, BP. I like it. I've got him at 11. Let's go there.
So James Wood, there was never any question about his physicality coming out in the draft. It was a lot of people thought it was a steal for San Diego to get him in the second round. He was one of the more physical athletes coming in the draft 2 years ago. He does have big levers, 6'7". But what's amazing about him is his contact rate. So if you compare his contact rate to a Churio, it is elite compared to Churio. And then going back to our prior discussion, his contact rate is not affected as far as weak balls, right? So his EV is the highest EV, at least from what they clocked last year, of any prospect. I think he was at 92 average EV. So he hits the crap out of the ball. The one thing that moved him up for me, besides me acquiring him for my team, I will admit my bias here. But why I did want to acquire him is how they were clocking his speed in the spring. You look at somebody big like that and you make assumptions as far as their speed, but he's genuinely a 60 speed right now. It depends on how he's going to fill out and so forth. But I like that as well. They're keeping him in the outfield. I don't think he will go to first because of a lack of athleticism. But maybe just because of his size, but yeah, he's just a fantastic athlete. He has what I look for as far as EV and contact and eye as well, at least so far. And then so that's why I put him above Churio. And then I moved him up in kind of the 5 category area. I'm not sure he will be able to do that with steals, but just in the sense of having that potential with speed, he is that kind of elite athlete that I like there.
Do you worry at all about the really long lever type players being able to make enough contact? I know
Uh,
it's a conversation. It was a conversation about Judge a little bit. Um, I don't players that come to mind that were that big, like a Dave Winfield. I don't know if you do you see any of those issues with Wood at all, or do you see his hit tool as like where do you have his hit tool? I think I have it at 60 myself.
I have it at 60 as well. I don't have too many concerns, and that was the big concern of him coming out, why he moved to round two, right? As
Mm-hmm.
far as his levers, as far as his size and so forth. In some ways, he's kind of comparable to on the opposite end of of who he would face, a Yuri Perez, in the sense that the stereotype of somebody big, long levers with a pitcher is not gonna have repeatable motion, not athletic, so forth. I think he's kind of the Yuri on the hitting side. He's outside of the box when it comes to expectations with somebody that big, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that's why he moved up. And I think that's why, and frankly, I think he was the determining factor in the trade for Soto. He was the piece the Nats wanted.
I agree.
Um, so so yeah, the now speaking of the Nats, coming from a Nats Expo fan, that's going to be the downside, right? What are they going to do with hitters I like? Wood, what are they going to do with Green? What are they going to do with Hassel? I think there's been rumors that they have really changed their system. There's been a lot of new hires within their system to look at swings, analytics, and so forth, hitting philosophy. So hopefully that has an effect. I don't think there was any major switch over last year as he went to the Nats minors. There was with Hassel, but I think Hassel is just it's just tough to go across the country in the last segment of the year and to expect the hitter to continue, right? And so,
Right.
so that's probably more of a thumbs up to Wood than it is something negative for Hassel, in my opinion.
So I think they didn't they hire DeJohn Watson to be their player development guy? I think he was with the Marlins for a long time. And what I understand is that he has changed some of the way that they develop hitters. But yeah, to your point, I guess that's part. I have him at 11. I see the same things you do. It's hard to trust the Nationals to do the right thing, right? It just is. I also like I said, I have some questions around a 6'7" hitter, right? It's
Mhm.
hard to be coordinated at that height. We talked about Yuri on the last pod. Um, I love Wood. I don't know if I can put him above the other guys I have in the top 10 quite yet. So real quickly, I just got a text while you were talking from Soul Kitchen in our home league, and his exact words were, "Any chance or feel for moving Volpe?" And I said, "Not one bit. LOL." And his response was, "Good to know. Thank you. Appreciate the swift and absolute resolve." But you know what though? I think not that I got Volpe on the cheap. Obviously, I got him for a pretty penny, right?
Yeah, yeah, it took
However,
a gutsy call.
however, I feel like if you want in on these players, you got to be in on them a year or two before. You can't be
Mhm.
in on Volpe when Volpe is about to get called up. You got to be
Uh-huh.
on Volpe 2 years ago because you saw something there and you believed in it, right? And I think this is just a great example. I could ask for the best player on his team, of whom I don't know who that is. I
Hmm.
could ask for the best player on his team, and it would be a legitimate ask because
Uh-huh.
I play with keepers, right? Like
Uh-huh.
I find it fascinating that when a top prospect like him, like Volpe or Carroll comes up, you've got people inquiring and at times offended that you're not willing to listen.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, I'm invested in this dude. Like
Yeah.
this is your talk. So we've
Uh-huh.
got would I
But
do
but
it for would I do it for Judge? Yes. I think I'd be stupid to not do it for Judge. Would I do it for Jordan Walker? No.
mhm.
Would I do it for Jazz Chisholm? No. Would I do it for any of his pitchers? No, like, so Judge is the only player on his entire team that I would make the trade. And even then I would hesitate because of age, position, and I don't like Aaron Judge.
Uh-huh.
Right.
And it
So
kind of goes, if you're going off a building philosophy, why change it, right?
totally.
If you know, so you know, if you've invested in him, why would you want to move him? Now, in
Right.
defensive soul, I think he's more on board with us because he's one that got Jordan Walker in
I
the
agree.
draft 3 years ago, right?
I
And
agree.
he gets texts about Walker now, and it's kind of like, well, WTF? I've been holding him on for 3 years just for you, so I could trade him to you now, right?
Totally. No,
Yeah,
totally.
and
But it's interesting though, like from a team build standpoint, I already have Julio and Ronald Acuna. I don't having Judge would be nice and would be smart for the next couple of years in some ways, but who replaces Volpe at short? I'd almost rather have an okay outfield three and have Volpe at short than have Judge at my outfielder and then have a shitty shortstop, right? So I just it's fascinating to me. This is no knock on Soul. I think it's funny. Very coincidental that it happened
right when you're talking about Volpe.
during the pod and while we're talking about Volpe, but it speaks to the value of scouting minor leaguers. It speaks to the volume of the work that we've done to kind of know who's next, right? So
Yeah.
I found it really interesting and funny.
And you can use them like if you are overloaded. Like I think I was having this discussion. Oh, balls deep, right? He kept Lawler, right? Um, he has Bichette, Turner, and Lawler now. And the question is, why would you do it? Well, because that's cash, right? That's something you're investing in that you could eventually trade. And I think sometimes in fantasy, and I do the same thing. I'm looking at my lineup and I want to balance my lineup, but I'm not thinking, well, how could I use this as cash in the future, right?
It's assets, right? It's accumulating assets. And I'm just, I don't know, we kind of say all on this pod anyways, but I had a manager inquire with me as to why Balls Deep kept Bichette, who is shortstop only now, Turner, who is shortstop only now, and Lawler, as you said, because errors is a random category in our league, and you get knocked for errors, so you don't want your utility player to be a middle infielder, right? And so the question was, because the manager asking me really likes Lawler and really wanted him to be back in the draft pool, asked me, why is he keeping all three? And he was angry about it. I said, because they're assets. They're assets. Like the fact that you want Lawler means that he can trade Lawler to you for something really good, right? If he becomes a top prospect, of which I don't think he is. But point is that you don't give up an asset to fill a roster position that you don't have filled. You keep the asset to acquire a better player to fill that hole down the road, right? I just people want to check off boxes, as you said, to say, okay, I've got a catcher, I've got a first baseman, I've got a second baseman. And really, do you have to do that sometimes? Sure. But it's not, if you do it all the time, you run the risk of missing out on quality talent at certain positions, right? You also can't do the opposite, which is count on Volpe to make the team 2 weeks ago and not draft Jorge Polanco to play second so that Simeon can play third, right? You've got to be able to kind of balance those two things. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's all those dynamics are the roster building dynamics are super interesting. How many minors players to carry? Like the question you asked me on the last pod about SPs, super interesting. We all have our different.
You made a trade right after that.
I did. I did. I said, don't carry too many pitchers. Then I went out and traded Jared Kelnick for Gavin Stone.
It's funny. Maybe this is broadcasting live because that Stone trade came up during our pod too.
Right. For me, that wasn't as much, I need to balance my roster out a bit more. But that was more about really believing in Gavin Stone for this year and willing to pay to roster him. That was more of that was. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be back. We'll get to my number 3, and then we'll try to get through 10. And then after that, cover some big risers, big fallers, and anything else that we want to kind of touch on. So this doesn't
And
mean
your 3 is probably going to be Ellie. It's
it
my
is Ellie.
guess.
It is Ellie. We'll
Yeah.
come back.
I had him
You said you had Ellie at 20?
at one point, yeah, when I didn't like his strikeout rate, but if I'm using the 5 category ceiling thing, then he needs to be in the top 10 for sure.
Mm-hmm. He's my number 3. I had him at 4 initially. I don't really have too much to say that we haven't gone over already that everybody doesn't know. Obviously, he's probably the best athlete of anybody in minor league baseball. 6'5", close to 6'6", right now, 220, 225, but strong, fast, athletic, could play basketball, could play football. What I like, though, is what is starting to come out of the Reds organization about his focus, his work ethic, uh, his desire to stay at short, right? There's pride in playing shortstop for him. I don't think that's where he stays, but I like to hear that, right? I want to hear that he's angry. He wants to play the position that he believes he's best at. He wants to be in the middle of the diamond. He's a diamond junkie, right? He just wants to play baseball. All those things say to me that there's a desire to be great. And when you couple that desire with the type of athleticism that he has, and then, it's not zone contact. We talked about zone contact in the past or earlier in this episode as being on the extreme low end, being a warning sign. He doesn't have that, right? He makes contact in the zone. His problem is that he chases too many pitches outside of the zone. That's something that can be corrected. That's something that can be taught. So I thought about him being at 1 because I think his upside is greater than any player in minor league baseball. I think he can be the best player in baseball quickly if he figures this out. I can't put him below 3 because of that, but Volpe and Carroll are major leaguers, and we are waiting for Ellie De La Cruz to figure some stuff out first. So I don't think it's fair to put him at 1, but he is my number 3. He is a player that if the price wasn't exorbitant, I would want to acquire now and down the road. So talk to me about anything else that concerns you with De La Cruz.
Yeah, I don't I would, if for somebody being my top 5, I would want to see 50 to 60 hit. I don't see it there yet.
Mm-hmm.
He has gotten better in the winter ball. I did watch his at bats in the spring, though limited. He has gotten better with the eye and patience, and that's something that can be taught with that type of athleticism. Sometimes you don't blame somebody for not being patient, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of the swing and miss isn't too bad. I think we've talked about this before, and this goes back to Carroll. Carroll has some in zone swing and miss. And in some ways, as I'm cheering for him, as I'm watching him, I want him to do that. I don't want him to do a weak grounder to third base, right? Because he's late on it. So swing and miss in some cases for elite hitters is overrated, I would say. And I think so I would give him that, but I don't see the hit tool. I also would push back. I think Elijah Green's a better athlete than De La Cruz. I think I think people have pushed back on Green's hit tool. I like Green's hit tool more than De La Cruz. I don't have them. I have them next to each other because they're both outstanding elite athletes compared to everybody else on this list. But Green's swing is short and sweet. I saw he had limited at bats, but he had some clutch, great at bats this spring that really I have no problem putting him he's at 10 in my list. Cruz is at 9. So I don't know. There's, like you said, and like I said earlier, there's kind of my top 12 here. I think my top 10, outside of Volpe and Carroll, I think it is very volatile as far as moving my players up and down. But But I liked that no matter where they were, that I put De La Cruz and Green together, because I just see uber elite athletes there, and I'm cheering for them to bring that around. Since Cincinnati does have the upper hand, I think they've done well in developing players now. I love listening to their GM on a broadcast 2 nights ago. He knows what he's doing. In developing the players and in the trades that they've made. Some of them some of the players come locally here from Seattle. So again, the green downside is, what is Washington going to do? Yeah.
I would also argue though that, so I have Green at 21. I did elevate him from 33. Some of that was the athleticism, explosiveness argument that I made earlier. But the difference between Green and De La Cruz is Green's 18 and had 43 at-bats in A-ball or in rookie ball. De La Cruz was in high A and double A and dominated and hit 28 home runs and had 47 stolen bases, right? So, yes, they're both hyper athletic, right? They're 80 scale athletes, both of them. I think that they're similar athletes. They're built differently, but similar types of athletes. And they both have swing and miss issues. But for me, the difference is one has dominated in double A, and the other one has 43 at-bats in rookie ball. So that's the differentiator for me. Who do you have at 4?
At 4, I have Jackson Chourio. I think we've talked a lot about him. Again, he's got the athleticism. He's not like the unique physical build of a De La Cruz or a Green or even a Wood, but he has the prototypical build of a center fielder. He was kind of the talk at the start of season last year. You could have got him for free, talking about investments. So shout out to Brandon here for getting him up early. So he has that 25 30 30 30 type of outlook for an outfielder. The question is once we see him more in double A, how is that going to play out? Is it going to continue? And I think most scouts are expecting even better as he moves forward. So the one caution I have, as far as just reading the ice to the ground scouts, is he is up on a lot of scouting lists because of something that is not valued in fantasy baseball, and that is he's going to be a Gold Glove center fielder. So that pushes him up because of his defense. We see the same thing with PCA, with the Cubs. So that's just as far as doing research, and caution as far as what they say about him, kind of filtering that out as well. But I still think he's a top five prospect. He could be one at the end of the year. He's not going to be my choice when we pick that on Saturday, who we think number one will be, but he's definitely would be in consideration for being a top 3 prospect at the end of the year.
So Chourio over Jordan Walker?
Yes, because again, it goes to for me, it goes to the speed thing. I know Walker, just like Wood, kind of has, I think his speed is underrated because he's big build, power hitter. But yeah, I just have that bias towards these the extra speedy 5 category guys. I don't want to necessarily categorize Walker as that. And Walker does have I do have a little bit of question, but this could be with Chourio as well, as far as swing and miss. But again, with these elite players, look at Judge's swing and miss, right? Best player in baseball, arguably
sub 80% contact. So I have Walker at 4, Chourio at 5. When I think of Chourio, I think, what is his upside, right? If Jackson Chourio is, say, 85% of what we think he can be, what are we looking at? We're looking at probably a 25-25, maybe 30-30 at his peak. Great defensive center fielder.
Mhm.
which is similar to the way we talked about Carroll, right? So it's not knocking him, but again, I get back to Volpe. I'm getting the same thing at shortstop from a Volpe, which is why I have him over Churio.
Mhm.
Now, Jordan Walker, on the other hand, is closer to the major leagues. And while he's not giving you 25 steals. I'd say at peak, you're getting 10 to 12 from Walker, but you've got 45 home run potential. He could potentially win you the home run category or win you the OPS category, right?
Mhm.
And so to me, Churio is a great team build. Churio is the type of player I tend to target, which is give me balance across the board, don't hurt me. Um, but Jordan Walker has the potential to be an MVP. I don't know if Churio has MVP potential. I think Walker does. So I have Walker at 4. I do worry a ton about, he hurt his shoulder in spring training, and before that he was rocketing up draft boards, and he was kind of everyone's favorite player at that point. Is he so big that he's going to get hurt, right? In the same way that Judge gets hurt. Are we going to be worrying about Jordan Walker getting hurt all the time? Because since his injury, he hasn't hit at all. But I still have him at 4. I have Churio at 5. I've got Gunnar Henderson at 6. Uh, it's hard to, I've talked about this. I see 20, 20, 25, 25 sort of potential from him. I do really like his hit tool quite a bit. I worry a little about him hitting the ball on the ground too much. He did it at times last season. He's doing it right now in spring training. Uh, I think he's putting pressure on himself right now. He's kind of the second coming for a lot of folks. So I still have him at 6. It's hard to grade a third base shortstop prospect with that kind of speed and power. But I've got an eye on him, right? I could
Mhm.
see him jumping Walker and Churio if he starts off hot. I could see him falling a little bit if he struggles out of the gates. The talent is still there to be a top 10 prospect, but I worry a little bit. Where do you have Henderson?
I have Henderson at 5.
You do. Okay.
Um,
Same
Same
word.
thing. I just think it's hard to argue against the value of a third baseman going 20-20 or 25-25. That's gonna, especially in a head-to-head league, that's gonna put you above your opponent each week.
Mm-hmm.
So and he does, I think in most leagues he does have shortstop eligibility. And they may be moving him back and forth like KC did with Witt last year.
Right.
So yeah, there's that value there. I think he does have the floor that I like. Um, he's not a high risk prospect
Right.
for a top 10 prospect.
If he say they ride it out with him, they give him 500 plate appearances, you're still getting 15 home runs and 15 steals. He could hit 230 and he's still going to give that to you. And I say it over and over again, power and speed is the name of the game in fantasy, right? You need the other stats, but power and speed is where you've got to start. But do you have a 7?
Well, I think we're at
Well,
6. So
but do you have
yeah,
a
so
6?
I 6 I have Holiday, and 7 I have Walker. Um,
Got it.
so we already talked about Walker. I like Holiday a lot. He moved into my top. Did I say Walker? I like Holiday a lot. He moved into my top 10. Just he does have that blend of eye contact and EV. We'll have to see. He's only 19. We really can't measure that, but we can get the measures from when he was drafted #1 overall by Baltimore. I love Baltimore's system now. They've definitely modeled themselves after Houston with the GM coming over there. Hopefully with better behavior towards the press. But yeah, so I'm confident in Baltimore. He has the pedigree. He, there's I do want to see, and again, this goes to wanting to see more metrics in the minors. I want to see his speed, how that's clocked and how that's measured. Is he really a 5 category guy is the big question. He'll be downgraded outside of the 10 if that's the case. But yeah, his discipline is elite, his contact's elite. I could see him as a 300 hitter, 2020 home run type of player at shortstop, and that's exactly what you need in fantasy.
I moved him from 13 to 9. 13 in the initial list. I have him at 9 now. I agree with all of it. I think he's got all the makings of a perennial 300 hitter. I think he's kind of a Marcelo Mayer with speed, right?
Yes.
And that's a top 3 shortstop for the next 8 to 10 years. So 7, 8, 9, 10. I said I had Holiday at 9. I have Tamar Johnson at 7. That was exactly where he was before. Black Wade Boggs, man. 75 hit tool, power. I do like the fact that he does swing and miss a little bit. We talked about zone contact rate. He's got that elite hit tool, but he also does, he's looking to hit the ball hard, right? He comes out of his shoes sometimes because of the amount of leverage and power he has in that swing. I've seen people point to that as something they actually like, right? He'll become strong enough and balanced enough where he won't do that anymore. But they like the fact that he's swinging as hard as he does and he makes the kind of contact that he does. You know me, I love, he might be my second favorite player in baseball besides Julio Rodriguez already. I did order a Tamar jersey, by the way, too.
Oh, you did.
I did.
What if Soul offered you Judge for
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 Tamar? I'd say no. Because I want him. One other factor in ranking Tamar in the top 10 is second base is a war zone. There's nothing there, right? It's decimated. And so if you have an elite second baseman, right, that's head and shoulders above every other second baseman, you walk into every head-to-head matchup with an enormous advantage over your opponent, right? And so to me, that is a reason to push him a little bit, is if you really believe that he has such a high floor and a high ceiling, you're having that kind of second base production is huge. We've got Grayson at, do you have any thoughts on Tamar?
Nope, I have him down, but not any knock to him. Just as far as I want to see more of him. As we move through, there's the proximity question. I don't necessarily see him as five category. I think Walker's the only one that is in the top 10 that is not 5 category. But yeah, I have no qualms with your confidence in him, just because I like those type of hitters. And I do see the just lack of anything at second base, right? And it's interesting to get a like somebody that's drafted to play second base, right? Because you kind of have to guess with other players who's going to be, even Volpe may play some second and get that eligibility. Or Peraza from the other end. Is Peraza going to be put there if they want Volpe to be kind of the star at short? So you kind of have to speculate with other players, but the nice thing about Johnson is he's second base. You can sit him there, you can invest in him for a couple years and know that he's going to be a top 5 second baseman for years to come.
Well, think about these two things. The first one is the other 12 second basemen I have listed in my second base, minor league second base prospects are Michael Busch, Curtis Mead, who probably won't stay at second base, Connor Norby, Oswald Peraza, Edouard Julien, Zach Geloff, Luis Angel Acuna, Jace Young, Nick Gonzalez, Justin Foscue, Wencio Perez, Nick York. There's nothing, right? There's a couple of guys that you wish cast become great, right? You could say, okay, Julien might have a 400 OBP and hit 25 home runs, or
I like Peraza a lot at second.
But what's Peraza's upside? It's 270 with 15 home runs and 20 steals. Or Mead. I think if Mead stayed at second, sure, you could make the case that Mead could be a very, very good hitter. I would argue Tamar's a better hitter and has more speed, right? And then even major leagues, right? You've got Altuve, who has questions about his number of RBIs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Great player, doesn't drive in runs. You've got uh
Albies,
you got
who's
right, you got Semien whose OPS is low, who's an accumulator across the board, and is I think is head and shoulders above the other second baseman, is still has a low OPS. You've got Andres Jimenez, who we don't quite know who he is yet, but he's probably 2020. Jazz Chisholm, who's going to lose his second base eligibility in all likelihood.
mm-hmm.
And who's the other one I'm missing right now? There's two.
Albies.
Oh, Ozzy Albies, right? Who's coming off an injury. So
Uh,
even at the major league level, there just isn't a ton.
mm-hmm.
So I think I don't know, it's a risk worth taking for me. Um, I think even if say he played shortstop, I'd probably still have him top 15 or so, maybe even top 10, because I believe in the bat that much. One other point is, to me, there's a huge distinction between so you talk about 5 category versus say 4 category with Walker and Johnson. But Walker and Johnson are going to, I believe, settle somewhere between like 8 and 12 stolen bases or 10 and 15 stolen bases. The difference between that and 0 stolen bases or 2 stolen bases, in my mind, is very big.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't worry so much. It's more about saying, okay, Volpe and Carroll give me added value. Churiel gives me added value. Ellie De La Cruz gives me added value versus downgrading a player who gives me 10 steals, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It, it's not a,
And it depends on the format, right?
for
So I
sure.
think Roto, that's very, very helpful. It's debatable as far as head to head, as far as when that's going to come up and how much control you have over it. One thing Forecaster used to do, which they didn't do this year, which I really liked, is they charted out consistency of the counting stats throughout a year, right? So Merrifield, I think one year had like 10 or 15 steals in September. And that's a big deal, right? To say, oh, this guy has 40 steals. Well, that's not going to help you in head to head if he gets 15 of them when it doesn't mean shit, right? So yeah. So the big question is, if they're getting 10 to 15, is it spread out? Is that going to give you one a week in a head to head? Yeah. So I think an argument could, steals are always close unless you're like an elite team that has all these elite players.
Right.
So that one steal can make a difference at the end of the week.
So Grayson at 8, we talked about him in the last pod.
I have him at 8 too.
Awesome. Proximity matters. He's now my number 1. Painter was my number 1 till he got hurt. I do, as I said in the last pod, I want to see Grayson stretch it out. I'm hoping that he's a horse and not just a 150 inning guy who they have to really baby, and they babied him up to this point in time. Holiday at 9, Yuri at 10, James Wood at 11, we talked about. Why don't you bring us up to number 11 on your list?
So we talked about De La Cruz at 9, Green at 10, and then I have Yuri at 11.
Okay.
My 12 is where the last athlete that I really love here, where kind of the cutoff is for me, and that's Masyn Winn. I have at 12. As far as his athleticism, he's showing that in the spring. I think St. Louis is toying with what they're going to do with him this year. They're playing him a lot at second right now in the lineup. He looks better than some of the other players, even a Donovan, who's going to be playing all over the place. So there's been questions as far as his power. What lifted him up last year is his power came into play, right? Especially in the second half of the minor league season. His power is definitely showing in the spring. He hit a 450-foot home run. His average EV was over 90. I think on that home run, I think it was 108 max exit. So I don't think that's a question. He came in as a two-way player. It takes two-way players a little longer once they commit to a position. Everybody talks about his arm. He's going to stay at short probably. He will have second eligibility if St. Louis is early on going to want his range over at second base. So he's everything. everything when it comes to shortstop. To me, I moved him ahead of both Meyer and Lawler, just because of what he's shown, the maturity he's shown since AFL moving into spring training now.
I I have him at 12 as well. Similar reasons. I know people questioned his game power and his hard hit, which I went on a rant on Baseball and Coffee. I'm not going to go on the same rant, but I think it's fucking ludicrous to question whether an athlete of that height is able to hit the ball hard. The dude throws 100 miles an hour. He's got at minimum 65 to 70 speed. He's 20 years old. He was a two-way player up until what, 2 years ago? And he's still learning how to hit. If anybody's going to hit the ball hard out of a 5'11", 200-pound body, it's freaking Masyn Winn, right? So this idea that he's not putting up the hard hit numbers you look for in a prospect, A, is crazy because of the kind of athlete he is, and B, he's 20 years old. Like, why are we measuring whether a prospect is going to be great based on their hard hit numbers at 20 or 19? To me, it was nuts. I love him.
And the questions, because the focus has been on how he's progressed as a hitter, everybody forgets how damn fast he is as well. Yeah, it's got 40 steals last year.
Totally.
And he has legit 60 to 70 speed. Yep. Along with that, the strength coming from his his upper body as well.
If I'm St. Louis, Brendan Donovan is exposed as an everyday regular, right? He's probably best playing everywhere on the diamond, getting 450 at bats by playing a little corner outfield, playing a little third, playing a little short, playing a little second, giving people breaks. I put Masyn Winn at short, and I put Tommy Edman at second, which is his best defensive position. Probably hit Winn at the bottom of the order to not put a ton of pressure on him and let him play. Right? Yeah. Like, he's
going to give you better defense than anybody right now. So totally, and you have a great pitching staff.
You improve your up the middle defense. You have built a pitching staff around inducing ground balls, right? Like, you literally have built a pitching staff that is trying to put the ball in play. And he's your best defensive shortstop in the organization by a long shot. You've got somebody playing short in Edman currently who's really not a major league shortstop. So to me, it all makes sense. I don't quite get the second base thing. You and I talked about that a bit. Esteury Ruiz is making the A's roster, by the way, I just saw. But yeah, I think if we don't see him on the opening day roster, I think we see him pretty quickly.
Can you imagine that left side with Winn and Arenado? That would be.
Well, it's awesome, right? It's like so Cardinals to have that too. So yes, he's both of our number 12. 13, 14. So 13 is Kyle Harrison, to no surprise, for anybody who knows my rankings. I love Harrison. I'm not going to go into.
I have him at 19, so pretty close.
Talked about him yesterday. 14 for me. He rose from number 63 on my initial rankings all the way up to 14 is the recently acquired Gavin Stone. I love him. I put him at 14 before I acquired him in our home league. The changeup is absolutely elite. Double plus changeup, tunnels with the fastball, right? Has a mid-90s fastball, has a decent semblance of command. Last year in 121 2/3 innings from high A to triple A, he had 168 strikeouts, 1.12 whip, and a 1.48 ERA. He's 24, so the Dodgers aren't going to be screwing around with him too much longer. I think he's phenomenal. And Gavin Stone for me is a good example of how my perspective or philosophy on young pitching has changed. I want to see refinement. I want to see when I can couple command with at least one elite pitch, right? That's a really amazing start. And I would say he's got a plus fastball, a double plus change, and a slider that is not, I'd say it's above average, but it's not plus yet. But he's shown the ability to develop. I'm in love with Gavin Stone. I think he's underrated as a prospect currently. He's in the right org, and I think when he comes up for the Dodgers, he's going to stay up for the next 6 years. I think he's great.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you have Stone? And don't say out of the top 100 either.
Oh no, I think he's in the top 50.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I'll be watching him. I was going to be watching him to make a trade with Smurf, but somebody else got him.
That's right.
So yeah, so I'm very paranoid about numbers. I wanted to have somebody at 13 that's a top athlete, 5 category, but I didn't want to put him at 13 because I roster him on all 3 rosters. I don't like the number 13. So Harry Ford's at 17, probably high for most boards, but I love Harry Ford. He's shown what doubters he's answered some of the questions doubters had, I think, in the WBC. He's developed power. He's building that. Just a 5 category athlete. I think Seattle's going to keep him at catcher. They may move him around. What's nice about that, if they do move him around, it may be some at second, which again is that rare position. If you could get a 5 category guy at second, he'll probably steal more if he does play more second. But he has that. To me, he's kind of like a Volpe at catcher. He has that leadership. He's kind of the team captain, and he has that team captain feel. So I could see them keeping him at catcher, not only because he has the physical tools, but just because he has that team captain aura about him. So I love Ford. He has a walk to K, a wonderful eye. Power's developing. I could see him 55, 60 hit. I could see the power 55, 60, and the speed at obviously at 60 or above. There is the homer element here as far as Seattle, but I have no problem with that because Seattle is showing that GM on down, they have an eye for talent, and just hearing what they say about him, they think he's the best athlete that this current org has drafted or acquired. So I have him at 17. Would be tempted to put him with all the other athletes in the top 12.
Love it. He's my number 31. He is my number 1 catcher. I don't have any qualms with what you said. I love him. There are a couple of players I love a little bit more than Ford. He's also 19 and in single A, and so that tends to push him down slightly for me. But in agreement with the assessment of tools, I know that there's been some talk that he might actually play third a little bit because he's got such a great arm as well. But yeah, Harry Ford's fun. So from this point, I'm just going to bring up a couple of players that either I've elevated or might be surprises compared to consensus. I put Tyler Soderstrom all the way up at 19. I think he's getting a lot of bad press because of his slow start in April, and because he's moving probably from catcher to first base. That position downgrade is like from top of the scale to the bottom of the scale, going catcher to first. But the talent's real. So he went from 71 to 19 for me. He was hurt last year for a while, which is why his numbers were bad. He had hit 159 with a 33% K rate in April. But then for the next 3 months, he hit 283, 344 with a 903 OPS. And he brought his K rate down to a respectable 25.2%. And he ended up with 29 home runs and 105 RBIs. To me, that looks like a slugging first baseman. I don't know what it looks like to others, but that looks like a slugging first baseman to me. And so I don't expect him to keep catcher eligibility. If he does, obviously that's a huge plus. I also think the A's are going to, they need a star. They need someone to kind of be the face of that franchise. And Soderstrom has the kind of bat that can do it. So I have him up at 19. Where do you have Soderstrom?
I have him in the 70s.
Okay. So you're
So
kind of where I was before or at the beginning of the offseason.
yes, uh-huh. Yeah, I
Mhm.
just like to see more out of the A's in developing him. He does have the pedigree. He would be expected to be in your range when they drafted him, right?
Mhm.
And the question is, did they develop him well? But yeah, I think he has a power. I think his eye is underrated. He
Mhm.
does have the swing and miss issue. I think he had an extremely slow start in the minors last year. If you take away his slow start, he'd be one of the top first basemen on the board when it comes to just spring training. I mean, minor league performance last year. So
Right.
I do want to bring up another A that made it to my list.
Mhm.
That maybe first base or outfield. A big, strong athlete, performed well in spring, and that's Lawrence Butler. I have him right at 100. I like having my 100 guy be the one that's going to jump up boards, I think. He's 6'4", 185, at least listed as that. He's bigger as far as weight goes now. He tore the ball apart in the spring. Has kind of has that deceptive Walker speed as well as his power. So he's one to watch in the A's organization. And I think the A's are. So back to Lawrence Butler. The A's are very high on him as well, and have a keen eye on him. So I think he's the type of player to keep an eye on. He has a skill set to. I like players that transcend where they're at, and I could see him as one of those players who could transcend that, strong enough, powerful enough to transcend kind of the downplay of the stadium that he's in.
Mhm. Who is the highest ranked player that you did not have on your top 100 at the beginning of the offseason?
That's a good question.
I'll give you mine while you look for yours.
Okay.
So I have Miguel Blaze all the way at number 30 overall. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
6'3", 170-pound outfielder in the Boston Red Sox organization. He was signed January 15th by the Red Sox in 2021 out of the Dominican for $1.5 million. So in rookie ball last season, 2022, 301, 353, 895 in 167 plate appearances. He had 5 home runs, 18 steals, 6% walk rate, 27% K rate. He's long, he's lanky, he's got tremendous bat speed, tons of leverage, keeps the bat in the zone for a long time. Uh, and you can see, just looking at his body, you can tell he's going to get bigger, stronger, right? He's got the potential to get to double plus power. Currently, I have his hit at 55, power at 65, and speed at 60. But you're looking at a big, like 35 home run, 15 to 20 steal type of player. I didn't think of it until describing him just now, but he's got the same. I'm not comping him to Julio Rodriguez, but he's got the same sort of toolbox that Julio had at 18, right? He's 6'3", he's skinny, but you can tell he's going to get bigger. He's explosive. His bat to ball is better than what you would expect from a young player at this age. I just I really think the world of Miguel Blaze. I think he's a top 20 prospect, consensus, by the end of 2023. So he went from a player that I had heard of but hadn't done a lot of research on, heading into the offseason, to putting him at 30 for me right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and speaking of that, so I kind of found the section where some players that rose are in. By the way, I did see Soderstrom. I have him at 57.
Mm-hmm.
But I have Blaze at 50.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so and he wasn't on my list before. Another player that I think we both kind of were down on that rose up my ranks, and I think he rose up your ranks, was Gabriel Moreno as well. I'm at 52. He's higher than other catchers like a Cartaya or
Alvarez.
Opapi, or yeah, I even have him higher than Alvarez now. And who else?
Uh,
Uh,
Dalton
Cleveland,
Rushing. So I also have
Naylor.
Dalton Rushing, Bo Naylor. Uh, actually have Ethan Salas at 79. But yeah, I
Hmm.
agree with you with Moreno. I actually have Moreno right one spot behind Harry Ford
Uh,
at 32. So I think
yeah, he's
Moreno's gonna rake, and he's hitting bombs in
yeah.
Arizona.
Yeah, his power's coming around in Arizona. So that's gonna be a fun team to watch. So I have Blaze at 50. Another one that jumped up for me was Junior Caminero at 51. I shouldn't have talked about him in Arizona because I think Baggies drafted him. Snake from me because I mentioned him to him. But anyway, Caminero there, that's probably Baggies getting him because he knows he's gonna get a good trade offer from me.
Mhm.
Kind of the investment thing, right? Um, Gavin Stone's in that area as well. Another one I put in that area at 58, which is probably pretty high for a lot of lists, is Gabriel Gonzalez with Seattle.
I've at
To me,
57.
he's a J Rod light for me as far as just having he has the eye, the hit skill. You know, he's not going to be a J Rod, but he's going to he could be a high average 15 to 20 home run, great eye outfielder. So I like him a lot there. Another one that um, is interesting with the Yankees is Spencer Jones. I have him at 59. I like to see what he does. Obviously he's in the shadow of Aaron Judge being that big guy. But see what happens in the Yankees. Some others in this area that I have downgraded: Hunter Brown, I have at 60. Espino, I have 61. Espino kind of is downgraded, not because of talent, just because of health. Yeah, so those are some in that area there.
Where do you have Drew Jones?
I have Drew Jones. This is another one I want to keep a close eye on because we really don't have any performance other than how he has been scouted out of high school. I have Drew Jones at 27.
Mm-hmm. So he went from 35 to 55 for me. Mostly because, like you said, we don't really have anything else to scout, but I get wary for fantasy purposes when all I hear about is somebody's defense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is what we
Yeah.
talk about with him. Dalton Rushing,
Then
catching. Go ahead.
I have Rodriguez right ahead of
Mm-hmm.
Emmanuel Rodriguez at 26.
Mm-hmm.
I like to see he's healthy again. I think he just had two at bats in spring last week. I like to see what happens there. He has the great EV and the great eye. Really, when you talk about power off the bat, he really is that type of player. So, and the Twins being that type of organization that develops those players well. The sad thing about the Twins is whenever they develop these players, they get knee injuries or they're, everybody's, it's like the Buxton curse, right? So he had that major knee surgery, and we had the same thing with your favorite player, Royce Lewis, as well.
Speaking of favorite players, I think what the listeners really want to know is where do you have Brandon Pfaadt?
Where do I have? He is on my list, but I have again I am going to defend his command here and be consistent there. Where do I have him? Um, let's go.
You have him under
I
number
have him
four.
at 75. I have him like in the George Valera, Jordan Westberg area. I see somebody else right there. I see somebody else I would put ahead of him that I didn't catch. I put Abel ahead of him. I shouldn't have Abel at 77 and Pfaadt at 75.
Do you want to know
Um,
where I have Brandon Pfaadt?
he's probably not on your list.
I'm at 65.
Oh, you have him at 65. Oh, that's funny.
So
That's
I have
funny.
I have Pfaadt at 65. I do have Abel at 73, so just below. Some of the other players that are now in my top 100 that weren't previously, Edouard Julien, I have all the way at 49.
Mm,
I hope he gets the opportunity. I love the bat. I love the discipline. Dalton Rushing, catching prospect for the Dodgers, I have at 56. He's 4 spots behind Diego Cartaya, but I have half a mind to put him above Cartaya. I wonder if the Dodgers actually value him as a better prospect than Cartaya at this point because of Cartaya's swing and miss and kind of in zone swing and miss. Let's see here. I did drop Lazaro Montes, my irrational ranking of him at 38. I dropped him to 61. I still love him as a prospect. I just think he's a little young to rank him that high. As I said, Pfaadt is at 65. Hayden Wesneski.
I have in that range of 65. I put Hayden Wesneski at 67.
Yeah, I have him at 67 as well. That's funny. Heston Kierstad, I have at 71. The power is real. He's playing really low, high 8 ball. I think he starts in AA. Heston Kierstad.
Okay, don't say that again.
Why?
Because he's available in our league.
Oh, well, Heston Kierstad should be rostered in our league because
he should be. Yeah,
he's got tremendous power. I think I would put his power at 65 now, but I do think he could even get to a 70 power. He's got that kind of leverage.
His at-bats, I'm seeing him in the AFL and in the spring. He's for real. Yeah.
He is for real. Well, he's also, I know they picked him as an underslot number 2 pick, but he was still the number 2 pick in the draft, right? Worth something. Mick Abel at 73, wasn't rated previously. Cole Young and Felnin Celestin, I have back-to-back 75, 76, both Seattle Mariners shortstop prospects. Jet Williams at 78, first-round pick of the Mets. Very skinny, small player, super fun to watch, shortstop prospect, 78. Ethan Salas, the 16-year-old catcher signee by the Padres at 79. I know that's a little strange to rank a 16-year-old at 79.
He played in spring training. That's awesome.
That's the fact that he was able to hold his own at catcher at 16 in a spring training game with the Padres says a lot about his maturity. I don't know if he has superstar in his back quite yet, but this is a bet that he might. Jordan Westberg at 81, just kind of your prototypical semi-boring right-handed hitter for the Orioles, but a good hitter nevertheless. Kevin Alcantara at 87, outfield prospect for the Cubs, 6'6", long levers, tons of power. Zach Geloff at 89, second base, third base prospect for the A's, 23 years old. I think he's going to get some time for the A's this year. He's also kind of a sneaky pickup in a redraft if you're in a deep redraft. A lot more power than I think he showed. He was injured last year. And then in 90 through 100, I've got Bubba Chandler, right-handed pitching prospect for the Pirates. Was a two-way player, was a quarterback as well in high school, highly recruited. I think he's going to start to come into his own. Junior Caminero, as you said, at 94. And then Eric Brown, shortstop, first-round pick of the Brewers, and Andy Pajes, outfielder for the Dodgers, all not rated previously.
I have a question. I have a couple of questions for you for kind of controversial players here.
Sure.
Two of them. They're kind of so we have Weimer, strikeout big concern, but he has the speed and power, and he gets a lot of upside because of his defense. And then you have DL Hall, who also has a stuff, but there's questions as far as control is. So where do you have them, or are they on your list?
They are not on my list. They were both listed as just off the list. Joey Weimer, I'm not a huge fan of. I think that there's going to always be risk with him. Even if he does make the Brewers, you don't know if you're getting a 220 hitter or a 250 hitter with 30 home runs, right? And if they're in contention, are they going to be patient with him to work through some of the slumps? So with Weimer, I'll let someone else take that risk. DL Hall, I love. Obviously the stuff is elite. From a stuff standpoint, he's probably a minimum top 5 starting pitching prospect. I had him outside of my top 10 because of the control and command. There's just too much reliever risk for me with DL Hall. If he becomes his upside is probably a really high strikeout, like low 30s percentage strikeout, 5 to 6 inning starter with a decently high whip. And for me, that's something that I'm not going to prioritize. I don't see Cy Young potential in him. Well, let me take that back. There is a slim percentage all the way at the top that would say Cy Young because of the stats. I just don't think that's going to happen. Not my favorite prospect.
Now there's three that I have in here that I like as far as looking at this year with the Reds. So I have Marte at 42, seeing how he's going to play out. You're a big Marte guy. Where'd you have him?
16.
16. Okay, yeah. So Marte is a close look. And then I have Encarnacion Strand at 45. I like his power. Hey, you were promoting him versus me last time. I like his power. He's hit everywhere he's been. There is a swing and miss, but he's going to be at a power hitter's park. He hits all fields. And then I have a guy that you are going to give a thumbs up to here. I know at 48, Edwin Arroyo. See how he develops with the Reds at 48. So those three Reds are going to be interesting guys to watch. As far as jumpers, I have Collis at 40. I have him ahead of PCA. I still do like Sal Frelick when it comes to fantasy, but I do like what we've seen. I have him kind of in the same range. We've talked a lot about Evan Carter. I like Peraza more and more. I watch him, especially if he's going to be 2B eligible. He's 34. That's a shout out to Sol, who this is one of the guys he got early as well as a Yankee fan. Where do you have Dominguez? Speaking of the Yankees.
84.
84. Okay.
I really don't know what to make of him as of yet. He was one that as I looked at my list again before this episode, I thought, I probably should have him slightly higher. If I look at other outfielders that I have higher than Dominguez, is he a better prospect than Gavin Cross? Maybe not as safe. Is he better than Drew Gilbert? I probably would take Drew Gilbert over him. Is he better than Heston Kjerstad? No. Is he better than a fantasy prospect than Esteury Ruiz? Probably, right? But Ruiz is a gamble on the speed. Is he a better prospect than Emmanuel Rodriguez? I think they're equally risky because you don't know if Rodriguez's eye is going to translate. Is he better than Spencer Jones? I think they're both a gamble, right? Same team, both a gamble. Would I rather have Dominguez over Sal Frelick? No, not because of proximity.
Speaking of outfielders, so here's my biggest jump in outfield, and I think I'm consistent because he was low in when we did our top 50 at one point. But I made the comment that if his power develops, he's going to be good, and that would be Zach Veen. He put on weight over the off season, hit the shit out of the ball in spring, and he still has the speed. So I have him at 24 now. He was
Did
maybe
did the weight help him hit the ball in the air?
Yeah.
Okay.
How many dongs did he hit? Four to five?
Something like that. The question with him is he going to be able to elevate? I have him at 47. He's in the same range for me as in that range. I have a ton of outfielders. I've got Hassel at 45, Evan Carter at 46, Bean at 47, Oscar Colas at 50, PCA at 54, Drew Jones 55, Gabriel Gonzalez 57, Sal Frelick 60. So I have a lot of those outfielders in that same range. I think you kind of choose your own adventure with which one you want to kind of pursue those particular stats with. I don't know if Veen is separating himself from that yet. If he does, and the speed remains, then you're talking about a top 20 prospect, right? Because he's stolen a ton of bags in the last couple of years. For me, it's a wait and see. People have talked up some of the prospects in the Rockies organization recently. I haven't seen it yet. It's just still a wait and see for me with the Rockies.
Where do you have Tovar?
What's that?
Where do you have Tovar? Speaking of the Rockies,
53.
3.
High average, less power. another player that I think is elevated because of his defensive ability on these lists. And that's not what we play, right? Defense is only important as far as guaranteeing playing time, right? That's all it's important for, that and positional eligibility. Other than that, who cares? We're playing fantasy baseball. I'm trying to see if there's anybody else that is kind of the ranking is of interest. I do have Bryce Miller at 33. I know that's high for some folks. Like I said in one of our chats, just go watch him and then tell me he doesn't deserve that ranking. Just watch some film on him because I don't think a lot of people have. That's about it. I think you covered. You and I are similar with a lot of these. I've got Hunter Brown at 63. It's probably low for a lot of folks. He's not Justin Verlander. I'm sorry. Do you want to talk a little bit about Zach Neto's swing that we saw in spring training?
He's not on my list.
Because of the swing?
Yeah.
That was bad. For those who haven't seen, he just has a really, such a pronounced leg kick that he looks like he is a flamingo standing on one leg. He literally does for a moment with his leg kick. And you wonder if that's going to get exploited in the major leagues in some form. I don't know what that looks like being exploited, but for me, it looks like they're going to find holes.
I do have an angel on here at 83, and that's Edgar Quero.
Nice.
I think he's better than the Milwaukee Quero. He's just having elite contact, elite EVs, showing that with the counting stats as well. So he's one to keep an eye on as far as how he develops within that system. And I do have a Brandon player in here because I always have to give a nod to Brandon because he seems to like these guys. I do have Spencer Steer at 79, speaking of the Reds. I knew I was going to get a shaky of the head there, but he can take advantage of that park. He doesn't have the power, but that park is going to make him seem like he has power. He does make contact. He can be high average there, but he is 25 and a third as far as age goes. So I was hesitant to even put him on the list because of age.
Explain to the listeners what a Brandon player is.
A Brandon player is a pop-up later prospects that may do pretty well in the majors. He's able to identify them, or a pop-up really young prospect that all of a sudden is going to shoot up lists, and that's already gave him thumbs up to Churio for him getting Churio last year. So it's kind of fun. This is a strategy I use. I like to make a lot of trade offers and discuss, just because some people will reveal their hand or talk about players they like, and it helps with scouting. And so there's a lot of players in our league that I like to talk to just to get their takes on certain players.
I know this is giving it away for tomorrow's podcast. Who is your number one on your initial 2024 offseason top 100 rankings?
My number one is James Wood. Pretty easily. I could see De La Cruz hitting there if he works a few things out. I could see Elijah Green jumping up quite a bit. If what we saw in the spring is with his short swing and his hit tool being up there as well. So those would be kind of those that are competing for that spot right now.
So that's mine as well. I think James Wood will, if I had to predict, he's going to be my number one prospect going into 24. Two more questions before we're done. Who is a prospect not quite as bright lights, who could, with a big jump based on their talent, be the number one prospect in 24 that you may not expect?
You want to go first?
Sure. So
it's gonna be Blaze for you.
It is actually. So what I mean by that is there a player who's not really being slept on right now, or is too young, who is so good, has so much unlimited upside, that you believe has the ability to put it together and be the number one prospect next year, right? Go from, like with Blaze, 30 to 1. Who can go from like Ronald Acuna is a decent prospect to Ronald Acuna is the number one prospect, or Julio Rodriguez is a very good prospect and a high dollar signee to Julio. There's nobody better than Julio, right?
Mm.
For me, that's Miguel Blaze. I think I would say Cam Collier because I believe in his bat so much.
That's what I have my cursor on right now.
Yeah, I think the fact that he lacks speed is the reason why. The fact that he lacks speed and he's only 17 years old are the two reasons why I don't think people would put him there.
He could be a Votto, a 330, 30 home run, more walks than Ks type of player.
I
So,
agree.
so
I
that's where he could
agree.
be one.
I agree.
And unfortunately, he's available in our league right now.
Nah, not for long. Not if I have my druthers.
Do
Um,
you have Blaze in our league? Does somebody have him?
no, I do. I
Oh, you
drafted
do.
him and I cut Collier to keep Blaze.
Okay.
That's how much I believe in his talent. Um, what
Let's
was my
see. I'm going down the list here as far as any jumpers. As far as a jumper into a top 10, I still believe in Luciano. I think he could have a huge breakout just based on his talent. He's not a number one player, but I still think he's shot down too far. Marte could be the same way as well.
sure?
There.
I like
As far
that.
as far as pitchers, that could be the number one pitcher at the end of the year. Team Kent's is my number one there.
Pitcher. You know what? Honestly, if I had to bet on who my number one pitcher was next year, I would say Daniel Espino. I know that's kind of cheating, but
Hmm.
if he comes back in May and he pitches for the rest of the season, his stuff is too good. One other sleeper that I have at 34, but is not in most top 100s that I think has let's say top 20 potential going into 24 is Christian Hernandez, the shortstop prospect for the Cubs. Um, Interestingly, I've heard a little buzz from folks over the last couple of weeks about him again. He was someone that was talked about a ton like a year and a half ago. But I just find it funny. It's like we've talked about this before. Talent is talent. And just
Hmm.
because a 17-year-old has a slump doesn't mean that he doesn't have the same talent that you saw previously. So Christian Hernandez is one of those for me.
Did he
Um,
play in the spring at all?
not that I know of, no. Um,
Yeah.
I think I think that's it. Another one that's not rostered, I don't think in our league that I think should be is Michael Bush because he
Hmm.
doesn't have the playing time, but I think the minute he does with second base eligibility, you're going to get a big power source.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't trade him. He'd be better off if he was traded.
I think so
You
too.
see, I can see Abel shooting up
Sure.
quite a bit. Lesko shooting up quite a bit.
Yep.
Um, as far as pitchers go, Parada shooting up quite a bit with the Mets. You know,
Not a
like
fan.
Parada.
Not a
Um,
fan.
Celestin, let's see how he does in minors. He is. I think this international class was better than the past couple.
Agreed.
Uh, yeah. So, and then Zavala with San Diego shooting up. I have him at 97.
He's got a nice hit tool, but he in some ways to me he's kind of maybe hit tool only, right? And that's not a profile from a fantasy perspective that I love.
Brady House is one that could break out if his power comes around.
Man, we'll see. I worry about it. Any 18-year-old back problems makes me nervous.
Oh,
Is
and then here's my favorite. He had a great spring. One that I still cheer for that's solid second base is Nick Gonzalez. I have
Mhm.
him at 91.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
he's always even with the criticism of his strikeouts, he's always been plus 850, close to 900 OPS second baseman throughout his career,
Right.
even with his struggles in the minors. So I could see him overlooked. He's a hard worker as well, a student of the game.
Yeah.
So I'm cheering for him, and I kept him on my list because of that. Oh,
I-
a pitcher too that I really like that I put at 93 is Wilmer Flores for Detroit as well.
You looking for those low strikeout 4 ERA pitchers there? Is that what's going on?
Well, he's kind of he goes with the command philosophy, right?
He does. I didn't.
Stuff.
I don't know. I'm not a. Maybe it's because I don't like his brother either, but not a fan. Um, One last question. Where do you have Andy Rodriguez?
I have Eddie Rodriguez.
No, Andy.
Um, Andy, I roster him in every league besides ours because you have him in ours. I have him at 47. He probably would be higher if Pittsburgh played him from the start.
They pulled their head out of their ass and actually
Yeah,
kept him in the
exactly.
major league team.
I love him. Consistent from both sides of the plate. I could I this is where I have my frustration. Why not bring him up as utility? And play him some at second and play him some in a corner outfield and some at catcher.
Right.
I think their commitment to play him strictly at catcher and minors is baffling, especially when you have Davis coming up. He ultimately, I think, is going to be that utility player that will give you some, that will maintain his catcher eligibility, but will play all over. So why not start it now? Why He's almost 23 years old.
Right.
He's proven himself in the minors. He even could have given him the edge, for like a breakout rookie. There's a lot of competition for rookie of the year in the NL, but still, why not take that chance?
Right. You get an extra first round pick by having him win.
Yeah, so I think he's kind of getting screwed, if to be honest.
I have him at 44. It looks like we're in the same range. I guess the argument for the Pirates is, why would you elevate him over players like Rudolfo Castro, Ji-Wan Bae, Tyler Heineman? Let's see, what other scrubs? Austin Hedges. I, I don't get it, man. I don't. The Pirates are. I know they're cheap, and this has got to be a service time thing. But man, really, Ji-Wan Bae, Rudolfo Castro, Austin Hedges, and Tyler Heineman are the reasons why. Also, Henry Davis can't hit.
Yeah.
So I don't know that Henry Davis is going to keep him from playing either. I love him. I think he's a baller, and I'm super excited to have him in our home league. Any other prospects you want to talk about that you're passionate about that that caught your eye that we might not see on some other list that you want to touch on?
Not really. So I still have Meyer pretty high of 15. I think he's kind of overlooked because he didn't play in the spring. I think he could have a breakout year, but he's just going to give you those 4 categories. I have Merrill right there at 16. I have Vargas in the same. I kind of see them all the same.
Me too.
I like Vargas over Merrill because I think Vargas's speed is very deceptive. He's on a better team as well. I do have Merrill listed at second because the signing of Machado. Some were speculating that Machado would go free next year, and then Bogarts would move to third, Merrill would move to short. But I see those solidifying there. I see Kim as the weak link, and Merrill playing second next year. I see Merrill. Merrill is one of those players that is a better MLB player if you are a San Diego fan.
Yep.
Great to watch. But how much is he going to give you as a fantasy baseball player? I think he will give you a lot if he plays second. So that's why I kept him there. If I didn't think he was going to play second, he'd be down lower at short because there's a lot better, a lot more well-rounded 5 category shortstops. I would even put Lawler ahead of him, which he is not now, if I knew Merrill was only going to play shortstop.
So there's no guarantee that any prospect is actually going to play for the Padres, right?
Yeah.
I do think at some point in time the Padres are going to have to bring up young players to balance their payroll, and so that's an argument to say that Merrill ends up playing for the Padres.
Kim was on a 3-year contract, right? So
What's that?
Kim, when they signed him out of Korea, was he a 3-year contract or?
I don't care.
Mm,
Meaning, the reason why I say I don't care is I don't think Ha-Sung Kim is keeping any top prospect
yeah.
from playing, right? If Merrill's ready, Kim
Only
slides
thing Kim
into
has is defense and his
Kim slides into a utility role. He's borderline, to me, he's a borderline major leaguer, let alone fantasy player. But from a playing time standpoint, no, Ha-Sung Kim is not keeping Jackson Merrill from playing in the major leagues. I'm sorry. That's it. I guess I'm dying on the Ken Waldachuk hill.
Where do you have Waldachuk? I have him in my top 100.
23.
23. Wow. Okay.
23. I've got him
I
above.
like that. That's gutsy. See, he's one. I think we talked about this last time, and I think I even saw this with G-Rod yesterday when he pitched, even though they didn't broadcast. They've only broadcast like one G-Rod outing this spring.
Right.
He pitched really well, but he gave up 5 runs, right? And I think you need to watch prospects pitch as opposed to looking at their stats. Even you're going to chuckle with Reagan's last night. He came in the 5th inning. You can't put a guy in that may be your 5th starter to jump in the starter to come jump in the 5th inning and expect him to come out throwing strikes, right?
Totally.
I thought his stuff looked good. His stats looked awful. He was getting screwed by the umps as well. The umps have had tight strike zones with youngsters this spring. So yeah, but you're laughing, but it's true. I've seen a lot of youngsters pitch, and
I'm laughing at the Twite part, not the strike zone part.
The Twite, yeah.
No, I agree though. I made that point on the last pod that yes, Waldachuk's numbers have been horrible. But the couple of starts that I watched him in the spring, he was getting completely squeezed by the umps. And so if you're not getting a low strike and you've got to elevate the pitch, of course it's going to get hit, right? If you have to throw it down the middle, they're major leaguers. They're going to hit the ball. So I go back to the park context. I go back to the stuff. Without consciously doing it, I realize I have a thing for left-handed 3/4 slot, mid-90s fastball with ride and a sweeper with tons of movement. Like I just think that's a great combination. Him, Harrison, but I believe in him and I believe in the context. And I think that when you get a healthy pitching prospect who is 23, 24 years old, even 25 years old, they've matured enough physically to the place where they can start to throw legitimate 150 innings. And they have grown man strength at that point in time, right? It's not a prospect who's throwing too hard for his body type. To me, that's important as well when you're talking about rostering a pitching prospect for your major league fantasy team. I think that's why for me, I have Waldachuk and I have Stone and I have even Harrison. Harrison is 20, will be 22, but he's an advanced 22. Right, with a pretty strong body. So there's something to be said for that. I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna die on the Ken Waldachuk hill, but I think that we vastly underrate Oakland Athletics pitching prospects all the time, right? They always have a pitcher like a Paul Blackburn, not the same skill set, but pretty good pitcher, not a great pitcher, outstanding stats because of park, and because they know how to pitch. To me, that's him.
One player that I left on my list was Matt Mervis.
Mm-hmm.
I have 94.
Mm-hmm.
I go back and forth on this because I do trust the Cubs, but I think the Cubs are a little too confident that they're going to be good this year. But at the same time, I can see the Cubs saying, show us more than 1 year, right? Because really that was his breakout. So he's someone to watch as far as, is he going to show them more than 1 year? I watched him in spring. I watched him with Israel. I like his build. I like him at first. So
he's a hitter.
I'm keeping him on there. I'm watching him closely.
He's my number 80. I'm a quick Cubs bash before we're done here. Shitty owners, don't like their politics, don't like what they stand for. people are going to go to Cubs games because they're a fucking blast.
Mhm.
I lived in Chicago. My family's from Chicago. You can go there and drink 10 beers in the stands. Nobody gives a rip. Like everyone's having a great time. It's 70 degrees. It's sunny. There are day games. People just love the Cubbies, right? The Cubs are the Cubs. They're lovable. So signing Hosmer and Mancini and Swanson as their big guy, and this is all it's all PR shit, man. It's
Mhm.
all PR shit. If they want to put out a team that's just good enough to get all the fucking people to come out and spend their money, which I would do too if I was there because it's so much fun. Whereas the smart team wouldn't have signed any of those fucks and would have had Matt Mervis play,
Mhm.
have 650 at bats at first base because you want to see if you have a legitimate first baseman or not. Um,
Mhm.
Makes me frustrated because I have a lot of love for the Cubs. My grandfather
Mhm.
was a huge Cubs fan, grew up in Gary, Indiana. Like I love the Cubs. I live there, but the owners are bad and that approach is bad. All right, that's my sorry, that's my rant. Um,
All
this
right,
was
man. I think
fun,
we're
man.
running out of time, less than a
Yep,
minute.
this was fun. I
It was
appreciate
really fun.
your Brandon Pfaadt, all the Brandon Pfaadt information over the last 2 days.
And the
Uh,
Wall check and Fought will be watching closely, right?